Today we're going to talk about just reviewing the importance of why it's important to maintain our wheelchairs. And then also we're going to review and demonstrate just the inspection of some simple things that you can look at on your manual and or power wheelchair so that you know when you need to do something about maintaining or repairing the chair. So I think you guys, as wheelchair users, probably know that it's important to maintain your chair, but there has been some research done on this area. And so, when folks do not perform regular maintenance or routine inspection of their wheelchair, can actually increase your risk of having your wheelchair break down, which can lead to personal injury or death, and it can also increase the cost of your medical care. And I think that this is probably less common than the second point as to why it's really important to maintain your wheelchair. We know that your wheelchair is your access to the world around you. So if your wheelchair is broken down, not only can it result in an injury, but it can also limit your mobility and your ability to participate in social events or get to work or get to the doctor's appointments or your therapy. So it's really important that we keep our wheelchair running well. Um, there was a study done in 2016, and of the people who participated, up to 18%, which is almost 1 in 5 folks who were wheelchair users that were surveyed, reported that they experienced a wheelchair related injury each year. And furthermore, we know that 45 to 57% of the folks who participated in this survey who were wheelchair users reported at least one breakdown of their wheelchair in the past 6 months. And of those people, the folks that had a wheelchair breakdown, because of the breakdown in their wheelchair, they either missed work, missed an appointment, they were stranded at home, or in my opinion, even worse, they were stranded away from home or they were injured. So, doing some simple routine inspection and maintenance can be really valuable to keeping that wheelchair on the road and getting you all the places that you need to go. So I gave you a lot of bad information, but the good information is what can I do? Well, you can do a lot. You don't have to be a wheelchair mechanic. You do not have to be a repairman. The more important thing to know is how to inspect your wheelchair for problems, not necessarily feel like you have to be the owner of fixing all of the problems. And so I think that's just important to remember. Today, I'm going to show you just some important things that you can inspect on your own and go over what to look for when you're doing that wheelchair inspection. If you feel comfortable, you can perform simple maintenance on your wheelchair. I definitely recommend you keep your wheelchair as clean as possible. Wiping it down with a, wet, damp rag is usually the best way to kind of clean all of the things on the chair. If you notice that bolts are coming loose, definitely if you or someone that you know is able to just keep things tight, that's always really good. And if you're comfortable with making minor adjustments yourself, have at it. That's awesome. I do recommend that you have your wheelchair inspected and serviced annually by your wheelchair provider, just like you would your vehicle. So it's really important that you keep in good touch with your wheelchair vendors. All of the wheelchair vendors that we work with here at Sheltering Rooms Institute do say they provide this service for free. So reach out to your vendor and make sure that you utilize this service. One of the things that they can do is they do a really detailed inspection of your wheelchair, and they can go ahead and order replacement parts and pieces or tighten up the loose things that maybe you didn't see or couldn't get to, and make sure that things are running smoothly for you. Before you begin inspecting or performing any maintenance on your wheelchair, remember, do not perform any maintenance on your wheelchair that you don't feel comfortable doing yourself or having someone do for you. Anytime that you feel uncomfortable performing the task, you want to call your wheelchair vendor with any repair or maintenance need. That is their role. Um, you can, if you are doing therapy somewhere, you can ask your therapy team to help you with some simple maintenance and repairs. Like if they have a bike pump and they can inflate your tires or tighten your brakes if they've come loose, things like that. But you want to make sure that those folks are trained in wheelchairs. Not all therapists have training specific to wheelchairs. So make sure that you ask them how comfortable they feel also performing the maintenance before you have them do that. Finally, it's really important to know who your vendor is. I think a lot of folks, after we discharge from inpatient rehab, you've been given a ton of information. You've met a lot of new people. So if you're not sure who your wheelchair vendor is or you've lost their contact information, please reach out because we will get you reconnected with them because they're going to be your lifelong partner in helping you maintain your wheelchair and keep it running well. Um, and also remember that if you're going to perform the inspection or maintenance yourself, that when you're doing this, you're transferring yourself to a stable and protected surface to sit on so that you keep yourself safe while you're performing these tasks. Before you get started, you're also going to want to make sure you have all the tools on hand because you're going to be getting out of your mobility device. So you're going to want to gather everything you need ahead of time. Your wheelchairs are going to come with manuals, and you're also can ask your vendor, what size Allen wrenches do I need? What size socket wrench do I need? And make sure that you kind of keep a little kit of all of the things that go with repairing your wheelchair together so that everything that you need, you're not having to fumble through a huge case of different sized wrenches when you know that your wheelchair only needs 2 or 3 sizes for all the parts and pieces. So the next thing we're going to look at is some videos. What I've done is I've actually taken the Spinal Cord Injury Model Systems Knowledge Translation Center's website guide. I do try to make sure that everybody coming through our clinic gets this guide before they leave. However, one, I know I'm probably guilty of not handing it out consistently every time. And two, I know you get a lot of papers and information, so you might have lost this fact sheet. If you would like to you can write down the link here. Maybe Jenny or Allison, if you don't mind popping the link into the chat for folks so that they can get to this guide. But it's a really nice document that just shows you all of the things that can be done to inspect and maintain your wheelchair and when to call your vendor, and if it's something simple that you can do, how to do that, and why it's important to inspect and check each item, and then how often to do it. And it's for manual and power wheelchairs. Some of these things are interchangeable between whatever type of mobility device that you're using. So this is a really handy dandy guide. And what I've done for the rest of the presentation is I've picked out some highlights of some of the things that they have in this guide. It's about 9 pages long, so I'm not going to show every single thing, but some of the highlights of things that I felt were important. So let me just get the videos pulled up. All right, so the first group of videos are going to be geared towards manual wheelchairs. So if you're using a power mobility device, hang tight. Don't worry, that's also coming. We weren't sure exactly who was going to be present today, so I wanted to make sure to have things for both groups of folks. So we're going to get started with one of the most important things if you have pneumatic wheels on your wheelchair, checking your tire pressure. Some other part of your hand and pressing hard down into the tire. If it depresses more than 3 pennies stacked together, then you definitely need to put air in the tire. This should be checked on a weekly basis. If you need to add air into the tire, you are going to use some sort of pump. It can have a gauge on it. It doesn't have to have a gauge on it. You can also use a pressure gauge. You can also use an air compressor if you prefer. Make sure you are not sitting in the wheelchair when you add pressure to the tires, or you can pop the inner tube. And to know how much air you need to add, you can look at the wheel, and on the tire somewhere, it is going to tell you what the PSI should be. All right, so definitely keep those tires inflated. If you don't keep the tires inflated and you're rolling on even like a little bit of a flat, it's going to make it really a lot harder to push. It's going to be a less efficient way to get around, and it's going to put more strain on your shoulders. So really make sure you're keeping up with that. On a monthly basis, you should inspect the rear tires for wear. So you're going to be looking for cracks, any kind of bulges in the wheel itself, the tire itself. So the tires themselves can also wear out, they can dry rot, they can crack. So if you get to that point, you're definitely going to want to get those replaced. And so the tire is actually ordered separate from the wheel. And so you would just need to reach out to your vendor and let them know that you need a new set of tires for your wheels. The next thing we're going to look at is the rear wheel bearings.
So the next thing you're going to want to check are the bearings on the rear wheels, and you're going to do this on a monthly basis. To do this, you're going to tip the wheelchair on its side. You're going to give the wheel a good push, and what we're looking for is how well the wheel is spinning, and you want to let it rotate to a stop. If the wheel slows and stops quickly when you spin it, then the nut and bolt holding the bearing are probably too tight and need to be loosened. If the wheel slows and rotates backward when you spin it, then the bearing is not being compressed and could be too loose and need to be tightened. You're going to want to do this procedure with both sides of the wheel and make sure that they look symmetrical. Bearings do wear out over time. One of the first signs that a bearing...
Oh, sorry, I was messing with the volume and I messed up. Apologize for that. Get us back to the point in the video. Nope. Let me move Allison's face again. Sorry, guys. Okay. I'm going to just refresh my browser here. When I was practicing for you all today, this didn't happen, but I think we can get back on track.
So the next thing you're going to want to check are the bearings on the rear wheels, and you're going to do the bearing are probably too tight and need to be loosened. If the wheel slows and rotates backward when you spin it, then the bearing is not being compressed and could be too loose and need to be tightened. You're going to want to do this procedure with both sides of the wheel and make sure that they look symmetrical. Bearings do wear out over time. One of the first signs that a bearing needs to be replaced is that you might hear a knocking sound or a squeaking or squealing moaning sound. So if you have any issues with your bearings, go ahead and contact your vendor because they will need to be replaced.
All right, so anytime you hear any noises, especially clicking sounds, you're definitely going to want to get that checked out when you're pushing your wheelchair.
On a monthly basis, you're going to want to check your spokes. To do this, you're going to gently squeeze a pair of spokes together all the way around the wheel. What we are looking for is that there's equal tension around the entire wheel with all pairs of spokes. If the tension is unequal, you might end up hearing a faint metallic snapping sound when you're riding. Another thing is if a spoke gives when you pull on it, that might mean that it's too loose, and one loose spoke can lead to a domino effect of other loose spokes. Bicycle shops are a great place to go to get spokes repaired or fixed or maintenance if you have any issues with your spokes. If you have a lot of issues with your spokes, the wheels can collapse, so this is definitely an important piece to check.
Okay, so checking the alignment of your wheelchair. I've got two different methods that you can use, and you can choose whichever one works better for you.
So the next thing we're going to check is your wheel alignment. One of the best ways to do this is to roll your wheelchair through a puddle of water and allow the wheelchair to coast. After which, you're going to examine your tire tracks to check for the alignment. The track should maintain a steady path. In this instance, they obviously did not, so we're going to want to get our wheelchair looked at by a vendor to make sure that we fix the alignment issue.
So one of the things that if your wheelchair isn't tracking straight when it's coasting, that means that you're not probably getting the most efficiency out of your wheelchair, and you're going to notice that you probably have to push slightly harder on one of the rims than the other, which is going to cause an imbalance probably in your posture as well. So making sure that your wheelchair is rolling true or straight is really important. And then here's just another quick way to fix it if you don't want to deal with water.
The other way you can do this, if you don't have a puddle of water, if you have an open, flat, smooth surface, you can give your wheelchair a push and watch it roll.
And she is definitely out of alignment, and you're actually going to get to see why here in another video coming up shortly. The next thing we're going to look at is how the wheel attaches to the axle.
The next thing you're going to want to check on a monthly basis is the axle. So what you're going to do is you're going to pull the wheel away from the hub and wiggle it in all directions. If you have a quick release axle, which means the wheel comes off, a tiny bit of play is acceptable. What you're going to do next is you're going to want to check that your quick release mechanism works well and smoothly. So you're going to take the wheel off. It should come out smoothly, and then you're going to pop it back in and verify that it's latched into place. If the latch is not connecting, you are definitely going to want to contact your wheelchair vendor, because if it's not latched in properly when you are rolling, the wheel can fall off and cause you to have an injury.
So thinking about just the different things that you're inspecting, some of the things can lead to safety failures of the chair, and actually the chair, not or not being stable, and possibly leading to an injury. And then some of the things that I'm showing you today, that you're looking at, are also not just thinking about safety and injury, but making sure that your wheelchair is rolling to its optimal ability to make sure that you have the best, most energy efficient way to get around.
You're going to want to check your wheel locks on at least a monthly basis. So the first thing that you're going to do is, one, make sure that the wheel lock, when it is unlocked, is secured and not moving on the frame where it's attached to the wheelchair itself. You want it to be nice and tight. The next thing you're going to want to do is make sure that you can easily set the wheel lock. When the wheel is in the locked position, you want to push on the hand rim to make sure that it is securing the wheel in place. And then finally, you want to make sure that it's easy to unlock. If any of these mechanisms are not working and you are not able to tighten it on your own, you're going to want to contact your wheelchair vendor, because this is a very serious safety concern if you need the wheel locks for stability during your transfers.
So again, that was another example of a safety thing to make sure that you're keeping your wheelchair maintained.
The next thing that we're going to check, at least on a monthly basis, is the hand rim attachment to the wheel itself. So with the brake locked and the chair tipped on its side, you can give the hand rim a good push, make sure there's no play where the hand rim is actually attached to the wheel. The next thing that you're going to want to look at is just rubbing your hand all the way around to check for any rough spots, any cracks, anything that may be wrong with the wheel itself, so that when you're propelling, you're not scratching or pinching your hand on some sort of defect on the hand rim itself.
So the hand rims, your wheels are something that really comes apart. Your wheels are ordered separate from your tires, or ordered separate from your hand rims. So some of these things, that may seem like, oh, my hand rim is broken, so I need a whole new wheel, but you actually can just replace the hand rim, which is nice because obviously that's much less expensive. You're going to want to also think about, is my wheelchair still under warranty? Will my warranty cover any of these repair needs or replacements? Or will my insurance cover it? And that's an important thing to do, to talk to your DME vendor about when you're talking to them about what needs to be done with the chairs, making sure you know what the coverage for payment for the repair or replacement part is.
On a monthly basis, you're going to want to check your front wheels, which are called your casters, for caster flutter. To do this, you're going to roll the wheelchair in the forward position quickly, and you're going to want to check for any vibration or rapid movement of the wheels while they're going in the forward direction.
So the caster, if it's fluttering, the example in this video, the caster was not fluttering, but if it were, it would be waving back and forth rapidly as the wheelchair is moving forward. And that is definitely something you're going to want to get fixed, because that's going to impact the ability of your wheelchair to roll efficiently.
Another aspect of the caster wheel that you're going to want to check for is any what we call caster floating. So if you notice that front left wheel is floating, it's not making full contact with the ground at all times, and that's what we call a floating caster. If this occurs, it's going to make your wheelchair not roll as true or straight, and so you're going to want to contact your wheelchair vendor to get that lined up properly.
So when we were checking the alignment of the wheelchair, my thought is after we performed all of the inspection on this wheelchair is that probably our chair is not rolling straight or true because we have this caster issue where that needs to be realigned so that all four wheels are touching the ground at the same time. The next thing we're going to do is just a quick video on how to look at the frame of your wheelchair for any
All
defects.
common wheelchair frames have this tubular construction. The tubing at the joints can either be welded like this, or it can use lug nuts and bolts. You want to make sure that you inspect the entire frame, make sure that there are no holes, bends, and especially at the welded areas, look for cracks and fractures. If you find any of that, the wheelchair can completely fail, and you definitely need to contact your vendor.
So any defects in the frame are a big deal. You're definitely going to want to get that checked out, and hopefully they can fix it. The last thing that I think is really important if you're a manual wheelchair user is knowing how to clean out your caster wheel bearings. This is something that I feel like you or one of your loved ones or caregivers should definitely learn how to do because I think it should be done on a monthly basis, and we're gonna talk about why.
So the next thing we're going to do on a monthly basis is take our caster wheel off and clean out the hair and other things that get caught up in the caster wheels as you're propelling around. So what you're going to need is you're going to need 2 Allen wrenches that are the same size, one to hold one side stable as you turn the other one. So what we're going to do is with the chair on its back, you're going to take them out. Sometimes things drop. It can help to have magnetic tools to prevent that from happening. You're going to slide out the bearing. We're going to open this up and we're just going to check and make sure that everything's clean. So I would clean out that little bit of dirt. You can see there's some hair in here. I would clean that out. And then once you get it all nice and clean, you're going to put it back together.
So I'm a female. I have long hair. I shed a lot. What's going to happen is I'm rolling around my house all day, every day. You know, my hair is just going to get caught up in those wheels, and it can actually really slow down your casters, especially if you let it build up. So I definitely recommend making sure you clean out those front casters pretty regularly. So now we're going to switch over to some power wheelchair items to inspect. We're going to start with the cover on the bottom of the chair, which is also
Something that
known
should
as
be
the
checked
shroud.
on your power chair on a daily basis is that you should check the shroud or the plastic cover that goes around the base of the chair. You want to inspect to make sure it's not cracked, it's not loose, it's not wiggly. It goes all the way around the bottom of the chair, and what it does is it protects the motor, electronic components, and joints of the inner workings of the chair to keep them free of moisture and debris, which can cause damage to your chair. If you notice damage to the shroud, you're going to want to contact your vendor as soon as possible.
So that's really protecting all of that things, the motor and all the things underneath the chair. So definitely want to make sure that's intact.
The next thing that you're going to want to check on a monthly basis is the frame of the power chair itself, looking at all of your weld points, all of your joints. You're going to be just kind of going around the entire frame of the chair on both sides and making sure that there are no cracks, fractures, or holes. Obviously, if you find something of that nature, you're going to want to contact your DME provider right away.
For those of you who use a power wheelchair, it's important to note there are a little bit of different concerns if you have something in the frame of the seat of your wheelchair and you have power seat functions and there's something wrong with the frame. You know, when you're doing your tilt or recline maneuver and there's a crack or a hole or something, you definitely want to make sure that that's looked at because you don't want the back to fall off or come apart while you're in tilt or recline. And then the base of the wheelchair is actually a separate component from the seating system itself. So you want to make sure, you know, that your caster wheels or your front wheels aren't going to, you know, get off at the wrong angle while you're driving. And those are types of things that can happen if you do have a crack or hole or bend in the frame. Next, we're going to look at the suspension.
Something thing you're going to want to check on your power wheelchair on a quarterly basis or 4 times a year is your suspension system. The suspension system is going to make the quality of your ride more comfortable, and your chair will handle rough terrain more easily. You're going to want to just check these back springs here, and you're going to look for any kind of damage, cracks, or any kind of leaking lubricant from this area of the chair. It's very important that if your weight changes, you might need to call your vendor if your weight drastically changes, because they might need to adjust the suspension, or if you just feel that your ride is too bumpy, contact your vendor because they can adjust this to make your ride more smooth.
So some of you may or may not know that that tension and suspension is adjustable. So if you feel like you're bouncing around too much when you're driving, contact your vendor and they can take a look at that. It's recommended that you check the motor disengagement levers on a daily basis. So when the levers are engaged, you want to make sure that the wheelchair doesn't move by itself when you push on it. The next is you're going to make sure that the levers on the chair can easily be pushed into the manual mode position, and that once they're there, that the chair can be easily moved. So that's really important to make sure that those locking and unlocking mechanisms are working properly, because if you do have a power wheelchair breakdown or failure, what you're going to need to do is put that wheelchair in manual mode and have someone push it, out of the way or to a safe location, and that is how that's going to be accomplished. So definitely want to make sure that that is working on your chair. Another thing you're going to want to listen for on a daily basis is the sound of your motor. You can tell that this chair, the motor is nice and quiet. You're going to want to get very familiar with the sound that your motor should be normally making. And if you ever hear anything different, you're definitely going to want to contact your wheelchair vendor as soon as possible to take care of any motor issues that may crop up. Okay, now what you're going to be listening for in this next one is the clicking sound. On a daily basis, you're going to want to check the driving and braking system on your wheelchair. You're going to want to do this immediately after powering the chair on. You're going to want to make sure your speed is all the way down to the lowest speed possible. Then you're going to tell your wheelchair to move forward until you hear the brakes click, which should be immediately, which this chair did demonstrate that. You're also going to want to make sure that it happens in the reverse. This one had a slight delay in the reverse direction, but when you release the joystick, the chair should stop immediately. When you are going at faster speeds, your chair will take a little bit of time to slow down, so just be aware of that. So when you are driving faster, your braking time is going to be longer, so just be aware that the chair will not stop immediately when you let go of the joystick when you're driving faster. And you may have learned that on your own already. Now we're going to look at the joystick, the mechanical working of it. To inspect the mechanical aspect of the joystick, you want to make sure that your controller is turned off. You're going to check the joystick and the rubber boot that surrounds the base of the joystick for damage. You want to make sure that there's no cracks or breaks in this, because this is going to protect the inner workings of the joystick itself from moisture or damage. You're also going to want to make sure that your joystick is freely moving in all directions and always comes back to the neutral or home position when you let go. Maintaining the battery life is a very important aspect of maintaining your power wheelchair properly. You're going to want to make sure that you are charging your power chair nightly. You never want the batteries to fully die, because if you do, the battery life will never be the same and it will never run as long again. So it's very important to check to make sure that your connections are nice and secure, that the charger is actually charging the power wheelchair, and that you want to make sure that there's nothing wrong with the actual charger of your wheelchair by making sure that all of the components are working correctly and when plugged in that your lights are on. So guys, make sure that you're charging that wheelchair every night so that those batteries last as long as possible.
very important to make sure that you're checking the range of your power seat functions. So when you're doing this, you're going to want to make sure that you don't hear any noises, any screeching, any clicking. If so, then you probably need to contact your vendor to have an actuator fixed. Another thing that's important is you're always going to want to go through the full range. I'm not going to go through the full range just to save time today, but you always want to do tilt, then recline, then your power legs, and go through that full range and make sure that there's no sounds at any point in the range and that there's nothing keeping the wheelchair from going through its full available range.
All right. And then last but not least, checking the electrical wiring and the connections.
On a monthly basis, you're going to want to just run your hands on all the wires and check the electrical connections to make sure that there's no corrosion, that they're not loose, and that everything's working properly. You can see on this chair that we have a wire that needs to be tied up. You can use zip ties to attach it so that things aren't hanging down, because this is a recipe for it to get caught and pulled out. And then again, on the back here, you're just going to want to check all the connections, making sure that nothing looks corroded and that everything is firmly intact and that there's no cuts or breaks with exposed wiring on the inside of the coating.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. I hope this is helpful. If you would like a copy of or a link to get that guide, please let us know. We'd be happy to get that to you.